Hello out there, my name is Laolu Akonde and you are on to Inside Sources. Today I will be skipping my take because I want to have a full discussion with enough time with my guest. You will find out who. Inside Sources, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today, as we continue the conversation on the future of our great country, I have with me an eminent Nigerian, a law professor who was the former executive secretary of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption and later became chairman of the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission, and who is now on a sabbatical as a professor and a member of the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. I'd like to welcome to Inside Sources Professor Bolaji Owasanye, SAN. Prof, it's good to see you on Inside Sources.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm grateful.
Thank you for coming. So we normally start the conversation around the future of the country, because that's our theme. So I'd like to ask you that, where do you think Nigeria is going? If you look at where, the situation is today, what's the trajectory for our future, in your own view?
I think we're making progress, albeit painfully slowly. It could be better, it could be faster. But gradually, I think that Nigeria is heading towards a better future. We do not expect that we will not have the pangs and the pains of the birthing of the future that we desire, because for so long we had lived an illusion, wanting to eat eggs, eat omelette without breaking eggs, wanting to go to heaven without dying. Those things are not possible. We just have to face the reality. And it is the credit of the present government that some of those very, very painful measures that inevitably have to be taken are being taken. And so what we should be looking at is how can we ease the pain of the progress of the journey as we move towards. But I see Nigeria attaining its potential, not just in terms of size, because of the predicted population growth by 2050 and going into the future, but in terms of the economy. So part of the conversation I think we should be having is how do we take care of the anticipated population that we would have. If you have a large population that has no economic wherewithal, that's a problem. That's a problem.
It's a recipe for crisis.
For crisis. So it must have capital to be able to play in the economic landscape. It must be a population that is empowered educationally. It must be a population that is strong, whose voice is respected in Africa and globally. So, and those things do not happen accidentally. So we need to, it has to be planned. We have to have a program to attaining that. Right now, what I see, which is commendable, is the government says, look, we want to achieve a $1 trillion economy within the shortest possible time. That is possible, but there are other things that come with that, So it should not just be a drive towards capitalism, but what about the welfare components that goes with it? Housing, education, health, social welfare, infrastructure, and all those things. Those conversations need to go along, and they must be public as well, in my view, so that people can interrogate the policy measures that government wants to take towards reaching it. But for me, I think the future is good. In any event, if we were to be fatalistic about our future, we will depress ourselves. We must learn to see light at the end of the tunnel and walk towards it, and not be fatalistic to see the glass as always half empty, and from half empty to become quarter empty, and then it will become empty. We must always see the prospects for growth and for development. Otherwise, why are we alive?
Interesting. Thank you for those opening comments. So in your own view, what will you consider to be the greatest obstacle for that future that we all dream about? Is it corruption? Is it poverty? Or, is it poor leadership? There are several kind of factors that people have tabled. But I wanted to ask you, what is the greatest challenge?
I think it's a combination of many factors, including the three that you mentioned: corruption, poverty, leadership, and the system of government that we've adopted for ourselves. We've tried it for some years now. We should be asking ourselves, is it working for us the way it is working for others?
And in presidential system.
The presidential system of government, which is very expensive, where people who are intensely competitive, and if we're intensely competitive, a winner-takes-all style of government, is it good for us? We need to ask ourselves those questions. And because we have so many fault lines, and the elite and politicians can use those fault lines to further divide us, we have to ask ourselves, do we want to retain that? So I would say the obstacles to growth and development include corruption. Nigeria's corruption has become systemic, and to deal with it, you cannot just focus or fixate in one direction. It has to be holistic. It has to be an all systems review approach, not just enforcement,
right?
Which is what the people thirst for all the time. And I find it contradictory because the same set of people who celebrate their own, in spite of whatever alleged corrupt practices may be placed against their names, complain that corruption is not allowing the country to develop. You cannot pick and choose what kind of corruption you condemn, you want to have. So it has to be holistic condemnation because it is slowing down our growth. Then, of course, there's poverty. Poverty impairs judgment greatly. And when people are poor, their immediate instinct is to survive. Okay? Yeah. So even when they know that this is not, but because of the desperation to survive for the moment, take their decision in the choice of leaders, for example. They know that I should not be picking this leader. I should not be supporting this leader. He has a questionable pedigree and what have you. But for the moment, this person is meeting my needs. Okay? Yeah. And so people vote for survival rather than to extend their own pain in order to see a brighter future. Then, of course, you've talked about leadership. Leadership is also a major issue. But the leaders that we have did not drop from the moon. They emerged from amongst us. And so, my view is that the leadership we get reflect who we are. They are us. Okay? And we cannot complain too much about the leaders because they are part of us. The leaders know us and we know them. And so when we complain about that it is leadership, it sounds as if the people have a different gene from the genes
of the followers.
The leadership have a different gene from the genes of the followers, but nothing could be further from the truth. More often than not, the people know the quality and character of who they are putting forward, okay? And they are satisfied. They are satisfied. That is why they want to support it. Of course, long term, maybe medium to long term, they may have reflection and say, oh, I made a mistake. Okay? That's for later.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
If you knew and were courageous to take decisions to say, look, yes, this person is qualified, but I would rather have this person for so and so reason. You must have the courage to follow it through. Once you've decided not to follow it through, you can't complain. You've got to live with the consequences of your choice. As I used to tell my children, freedom comes with its own consequences. And you have to live with the consequences of the decisions that you make, that you've taken. They may not affect you now, they may affect you later, but anticipate it. And if you can prevent the effect of it, then you do so. So when I hear those complaints, it's as if nobody imposed people on us from outside and all that. We took those, even if somebody attempted to impose people on us, what did we do to prevent it, to challenge and to resist it. So we can not, but if we then realize that, okay, we need to change our leadership style, then we sit down and have a conversation. This is not working for us.
Right.
We need to do something about it.
I mean, now that you raised that point, in my view, and then I will let you make your comment, is that the presidential system, that you mentioned is not just expensive and also winner takes all, which are two critical aspects of it. But based on my own experience, I think the presidential system also discourages transparency and accountability on the part of whoever is the president, because the president is able to sit down in one place and not be compelled to engage in the way a prime minister would in a parliament, like we've seen. The president will be able to say that, look, okay, you just go and do that, you just go and talk, it picks people to go and engage. The president is not compelled to come and answer public questions. So you will see that a lot of the presidents that we've had since 1999, they rarely grant his press interviews. I think the best so far in terms of that, engagement with the people would be somebody like Obasanjo, who does meet the media more often. After Obasanjo, Yar'Adua didn't live quite for a long while, and then Jonathan did a little bit of it. The president under which I served didn't even like media interviews. This president, the current one, has done one in almost 2 years. So I think that the presidential system allows the president to be detached compared to a parliamentary system where the prime minister is sitting on a regular basis in open parliament and is confronted by opposition leader who will challenge him or her. And then there is question time that we question the policies and what is happening, and the prime minister must answer publicly. I think that system might be able to help us increase transparency and accountability and possibly, move us towards a greater, faster national development. What do you think, Prof?
Okay, so first of all, we were on a minister in this prime minister parliamentary system of government before. We changed to presidential. And we changed to presidential because, in my view, it was felt that it was more attuned to our culture, this Kabiyesi culture, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, I think it's unfair to evaluate and judge the president, for example, by the frequency
of the engagement,
direct engagement with the public, when it is not that the public does not know what is going on. Okay? Occasionally, they hear from the president, and you will know this better than I do. A president has many platforms to communicate their views. It's not when they sit in front of distinguished journalists and take questions and do Q&A that they are communicating.
Alone.
They have platforms whereby there's a ceremony or an event, their speeches, they're using it to say what they are doing or what they are not doing, and all that. When I was in ICPC, I used to tell my media friends that I owe the duty of communication to let you know what I'm doing. But nothing says that I must be the one telling you. Somebody whose job it is to make sure that they are communicating with the public regularly what we're doing, why we're doing it, and all that must be on top of that job while I am able to do other things.
But it is good to question you.
Of course, I made myself available through various platforms. The point I'm making is that it is not just one approach. And with due respect to journalists and the media, I do not agree that that is the only way by which the president, I accept that you must create those opportunities for seasoned, distinguished media practitioners to engage you.
To have an interaction.
To have an interaction with you. I accept that. That it doesn't happen. Some leader may say, I'll do once a month. If they can accommodate it. Some may say, I'll do twice a year. Some will say, I will do once a quarter. Whatever makes them work. But what will be inimical is a situation where the public is not being told what is going on. Nobody is providing explanation. If you, as a distinguished media practitioner, raise issues, or a media organization or newspaper through an editorial, somebody needs to respond. to explain in the name of the president or of the government. So once we have that, we cannot say there has been silence. Okay, so my view is that every leader or president will take an approach that works for them, and would also reflect how communicative they want to be. You know, how talkative in code they want to be. What sort of frequency of interaction with the public they want to engage in. That's the way I would evaluate. But I agree with you that the public has a right to know. You are leading us. We should be able to ask you, where are you leading us to? How are you leading us? Why are you taking decisions? Especially because whatever you are doing is affecting us and all that.
Yeah. So to the point about a parliamentary system, do you think that might serve us better?
Well, with the benefit of hindsight, I've had some commentators say we should go back to it, and I think it would have been much more affordable for us. The presidential system of government is expensive. It also presents this winner-takes-all kind of approach. Okay, if you were to have representation in government based on the number of votes that you won in the election, everybody will have a sense of participation, and it will make competition much more healthy and much more robust. Okay, but when you have just the winner by whatever margin forming the government, okay, in a system like ours, which is highly, intensely politically competitive, has many fault lines, you know, and sociocultural and religious fragility. We need to reflect about how better can we build cohesion rather than this approach of winner takes all. And I would urge that we need to give it a second. The third reason, of course, is the cost. The presidential system of government is extremely expensive. It's not for the lily-livered or the economically weak, you know. The parliamentary system is cheaper because those who are in parliament are also, they won't earn two salaries. They won't have two perks of office. They won't have the double privileges, you know. And if you remove that from the cost of governance, it's significant. It's significant. So I would say, to that extent, it gives us a basis to consider changing this presidential system of government for a parliamentary system or something that is more participatory.
Good, excellent. Thank you so much. So let's spend a little bit of time on the problem of corruption. I mean, looking at your profile, you were the executive secretary of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption. Yeah, you know, led by Professor Sage, you know, and then you, of course, went on to become the chairman of ICPC. I wanted to ask you, so based on your, you know, work in that endeavor, trying to, you know, push back on corruption in society, do you think that is the right thing to let people that have been accused, you know, by a government investigative agency of corruption, do you think it is right to let them serve, you know, while the accusation, and this is not just an allegation, you have an agency of maybe ICPC or EFCC or even police or any of the investigative agencies have said that, look, this guy has committed this level of malfeasance, you know, violation of public trust, whatever it is, corruption, misappropriation. Do you think those people should still be allowed to be in public service?
Okay, so
theoretically,
an allegation, first of all, we should not try to be puritanical about the situation. First of all, it's very easy to stop someone from their political aspirations by just alleging without proving.
Right.
Okay? So if it's just an allegation is insufficient to prevent someone. I admit that it may become a distraction if you do make it to the public office, get an appointment or an election or whatever. It may become a distraction because you are either out to debunk it or you can have a thick skin and just ignore it. Say, if you can prove it, please head to the court. So first of all, it is a court decision, a conviction, and the rules are clear. Anybody who's been convicted of a crime or an offense cannot hold, especially that involving moral turpitude, cannot hold public office for 10 years. It is expected that in 10 years, you'd have gone through some kind of
reformation,
cleansing, and then you can take public office. But otherwise, if it's just an allegation, now perception can be stronger than reality, and the judgment call will not just be that of the public, but even of the person. Now, if the allegation is so strong and weighty, it's not proved, it can weigh on the mind of the public to say, we will not elect this person. Or I, as an appointing authority, I will not appoint this person. It is not proven, but it's too weighty, and I'm not comfortable. So it can weigh in the mind of the person who has a decision to take. But if in spite of those allegations, for example, the person is appointed or elected, as the case may be, no wrong has been done. No wrong has been done. You see? So we have to, I think everything will depend on the sense of probity and uprightness of the society in which this conversation is going on. So in some communities, a semblance of anything that impugns integrity is enough for the candidate to say, I will not accept or put myself forward until this thing is laid to rest, is sorted out. But in some other communities, you say, well, I did not do what you are saying, no. But if you are saying I did it, prove it.
Now, what about when there is what you lawyers call a prima facie case, which means that those allegations have been cross-checked, proven by the investigating agency. They said somebody paid this amount of money to someone's account. It turns out, yes, we saw the movement of money from this person to this person. It doesn't seem that it's right. And when a prima facie case is established, you know that in the civil service, there's what is called an interdiction. I mean, they say that, okay, look, you can't. Now, in such circumstances, why should we allow politicians to stay in office, or why should we appoint somebody like that into office when there is a prima facie? We haven't gone to court yet, I agree to that. But when there's a prima facie case, why should we give politicians the leverage that we don't give public officers?
Okay, so first of all,
or civil servants, I'm sorry.
The public, if it's an election, or the appointer, if somebody has been given power to appoint someone, will not cede their power to the judgment of an anti-corruption agency. They can ever ask you for a report.
Right.
Okay? So if you do investigation and you find a prima facie case, you make a decision, a determination that we are going to arraign in court.
Okay.
And don't forget, the standard of proof in court for criminal cases when an offense is alleged is proof beyond
reasonable doubt.
Reasonable doubt. Okay? So the best that an anti-corruption agency can do is to file an action in court. Once those papers are filed, they become public document. The media can harvest it and have access to it and all that.
Right.
It is when it's at the level of investigation that you cannot have access to it. But once the moment we take a decision that this is worthy of prosecution, we file it. And that judgment, the final decision is that of the court, not of that of the investigating agency. So if an anti-corruption agency has investigated a matter and found someone prima facie on the face of it, culpable, that final decision, that inclination is going to be affirmed, validated, or denied by a court.
By court,
By the court. So at best, if the electorate want to use the outcome of your investigation to take a position, they cannot ask you directly for a report. But if you file an action in court, the media can use it. Then the electorate can say, oh, no, we cannot elect this sort of person. Or if it's somebody, a minister is supposed to appoint someone or put someone forward, and they read the report, They say, look, can you give us a report? It's like asking for a security report, which informs the judgment of the appointer as to whether or not
to appoint
the person, or say this person is a risk. I cannot appoint this person.
Yeah.
That report informs the final decision that you make. But anti-corruption agencies or law enforcement, including the police, that decision is not theirs.
I know. And I'm asking you as a law professor, somebody who has been in that situation too. I wanted you to give an opinion,
whether or not that report should count.
So for instance, if you were the appointing authority and there is a prima facie case that has been established,
it will definitely weigh on my mind in the final decision that I will take. But many cases that anti-corruption agencies thought were cut and dried were rejected by the courts, mostly on technical grounds for different reasons and all that. So the decision of the anti-corruption agency might differ from the final decision of a court or even a public opinion. I mean, in the run-up to the American election, many people thought Trump, having been convicted, having been this, having been that, would not. A conviction, conviction, but he was reelected. So the public had the benefit of the information about him, but they made a call. I said, this is who
we want. Of course, and we know that there are always variables. But my point, Prof, and then we move on from this, is that in the civil service, interdiction is implemented. The officer is removed to allow.
So the civil service is slightly different.
Okay.
Now, why the civil service is an entity and an institution of which you are part of.
Yes.
And subject to the decisions of the system.
Right.
Subject to the rules allow for interdiction.
Right.
Okay. In law enforcement, the rules say, once you find a case, take it to court. You cannot interdict the person. You cannot make a judgment call on the person. So within the civil service, the civil servant is part and subject to the decision-making processes. And part of it is to say, well, we found out that you actually forged your birth certificate. We have found the original. You mutilated and you modified, you forged, you altered your records. We are going to send this to the police. They found all that. They have the evidence.
Right.
But still, they will not call him a forger or a criminal. They must still allow a law enforcement agency to. But in the interim, you say, we are going to interdict you. The rules allow it.
Which means that you go and sit down.
Go and sit down somewhere. We will not allow you to continue to perform your functions. The system and the rules. So if we were to collectively amend the laws to say when an anti-corruption agency, prima facie, comes up with a report that says X or Y is prima facie guilty of that which is alleged, they cannot, based on that report, compete or contest or be appointed. It will be the law will say so.
Because, Prof, I mean, looking at the problem of corruption in our society, I think that we have to get to that point if we are going to have any headway. Look, this is a country of 200 million people.
Laulu, I do not disagree with you. We must be in agreement that this is the approach, that things are so bad, desperate times require
desperate measures.
I'll tell you one of the things I did when I resumed in ICPC in 2019. I found out, I cannot remember exactly how now, that some people, in spite of the provisions that says that once you have been convicted, you cannot hold public office, they are convicted and they remain director in one ministry. So after conviction. So I did a whole range of research to say, as far as ICPC is concerned, all the public servants who have been convicted, and all those ones upon whom we have done investigation, what the government uses it for is up to them.
Their own,
Okay? So we did an analysis, the case, the conviction, and all that. And I sent it to the president through...
This was when?
This was in 2019, I believe.
Okay.
Because the same year...
So you did find a lot of people convicted?
We found quite a few. Okay? And then some senior government officials who were under investigation, and we had found very strong, credible evidence. and we had said we were going to charge them to court, and we have charged them to court. I sent everything to the government so that the government can make a call to say, oh, this person will diminish the reputation and integrity of this government.
Right.
We have to, and in fairness to President Buhari, he disengaged some of them very quietly based on that report. But this was somebody who was willing. He could have said, I'll wait until the court reaches a determination. Some of them could have challenged.
Did that include the Mena case?
I would not be specific.
Okay, yeah.
I would not be specific. We submitted. So I'm trying to say there is room for this sort of proactive measure.
Right.
But the government could take the position to say, look, these people, these ones who have prima facie cases have not been convicted.
Right.
The ones who have been convicted were being shielded by their colleagues.
Yeah.
In some cases, and mind you, conviction does not mean you spend time in Kuje.
They might be convicted and then you are spared.
You just pay a fine. It's still a conviction.
So they'll pay the fine quietly.
Exactly.
And go back.
Exactly. You pay the fine, but you have been convicted. You can't hold public office for 10 years.
That's the law.
That's the law. So, and to validate the allegation of cover-up, sometimes the PS will say, oh, we didn't know this person was convicted and all that. So I made it a point that if we investigated and arraigned a public servant, we notified the ministry. Okay, and if they got a conviction, we notified the ministry.
Okay.
You know, where there's systemic corruption, you find a lot of helpers within the system. People who feel morally or otherwise obliged to help you. I'll give you another example where prosecuting a corrupt civil servant, and we need another civil servant from the same ministry to come and tender documents and subject themselves to cross-examination. And then every time you invite this civil servant, they will not be available. The court will give you an adjournment. And these witnesses are not out of government. These are government workers refusing to come and be witnesses
in court.
I had to, on one occasion, when I got a report about the number of times that this ministry had refused to yield his officer to come and tender evidence in court, I had to call the minister. I had to call the minister. This is going on. He was enraged, to put it mildly. And the very next hearing date, the civil servant he was either on leave or traveled to. And meanwhile, my people will say they saw him yesterday or 2 days ago, because they will give you a reminder. You are in court tomorrow. The case is coming up. You need to come to the office
so that we go together
to go and all that. So this is what you are dealing with when you are dealing with systemic corruption. So it's not impossible that even with a prima facie report, somebody says it's not yet proven, it's political. So the society will depend based on its own value judgment.
Right. Okay, last question on this corruption, and then we move on. So how do you assess our fight against corruption? I mean, having agreed that corruption is a major problem, how are we doing in that fight?
My view is that when you are dealing with systemic corruption, you should regard it like a cancer that is malignant, which has spread and will not spare any part. So trying to use enforcement measures alone, I'm not discounting enforcement measure. And what I'm saying here, I've said it in other public fora, will not work. It will not work. You have to use a combination of approaches, including prevention, prosecution, public enlightenment. Because to the extent that a society does not want corruption, it will not happen. But because we're tolerant of it, in fact, some people believe that they have a right to continue rent-seeking behavior. You know, so when you say, are we making progress? The answer is yes, based on surveys, but the progress is very small, very slow, and we need to have moved beyond like yesterday, like last year, like 10 years before. Because corruption obviously is hindering the development of the country, slowing us down.
Yeah.
It undermines the programs of any government of the day.
Right.
A government comes in with the best of intention and plans. Systemic corruption would
hit it up.
will completely upset all those plans. And by the time you realize that this is what is going on, you might have lost time to recover. Okay? So when a new government comes in with lofty ideals and ideas, if you don't recognize that these are obstacles that need to be dealt with. So what's my proposal and what was my approach?
Right.
It was clear to me that in a system where that is broken, the criminal justice system is broken from the point of view of investigation to prosecution to adjudication. Okay? You only know when you start. You can't tell when you end. And when corruption cases do not conclude, especially when they do not conclude successfully, it escalates impunity. It encourages impunity. You'd always find somebody who will be more egregious, doing something worse than the person who was arraigned. So these are the risks and the challenges of not fighting corruption. So what do? You try and take prevention measures. As they say, prevention is better than cure. Take prevention measures. Corruption is a crime of opportunity. Yeah. You have to reduce the opportunities for
people to be able to be corrupt.
It's as simple as that.
Okay.
It's as simple as that.
Right. So
reduce those opportunities and you begin to see improvements and all that.
Yeah. Because the recent or the latest Transparency International Corruption Perception Index is still ranking Nigeria ridiculously.
Although I have learned since my journey in this pathway to take those reports with a big question mark. Especially a report, and I've written about this and I've spoken about it both locally and internationally, a report that indicts the thief but not the receiver of the stolen good. The receiver of the stolen good is always scoring very well, but the thief, without the receiver of the stolen good, there will be no thieves because you must have a disposition method.
So in this case, so the person who stole
is the one that is ranked low,
and then the person who
receives the capital, who receives the stolen money.
Where it is lodged.
Where it is lodged.
Okay.
Who keeps it? Who knows that it was stolen?
Interesting.
Who knows that it was stolen?
And kept it.
And kept it.
Even did some business with it.
Exactly.
And made interest.
But they score well. They keep scoring well. They create platforms and structures to receive
stolen
and illicit wealth. Okay, they score well. There's something wrong with that system, and we need to interrogate it. There are other challenges with the transparency. So, whereas I do not justify a low ranking for Nigeria, I do not celebrate it.
Right.
I say I have a problem, or no, but not because you are saying so.
Yeah,
it's because I know
exactly
that I have a problem.
Good,
not based on your report, because your report is jaundiced. Okay, and your report is imbalanced.
Because he doesn't look at both.
He doesn't look at both sides of the divide. And indeed, your report continues to encourage the corruption that is happening in my domain. So I would not celebrate. And a few years into my public office, I brought seasoned journalists together and explained to them how these reports, how these assessments and surveys are done. And without prejudice to their own analysis, I said, you just need to know that this is a comparison of unequals. TI report is based on other reports.
Right.
Some of them are not of the same year. And when you compare apples with oranges, you rank country A based on 3 of those reports. You rank country B based on 8 of those reports. And then you rank us and say, we have done the same exam. We didn't do the same exam.
Exactly. It's a good point, Prof, for us to now move to this issue of illicit financial flows. And I know that, recently you've been helping the government through FRRS, to try and see how some of this hemorrhaging is coped. First, do you want to tell us where things are on the issue of illicit financial flows, which I find out, based on some of the work that people like you have done, that is a huge concern, the amount of money that is getting out of our country through several illicit means. Can you educate us briefly on this, Prof?
Okay, so first, I would acknowledge, correct, that I returned to academics, and from there started a sabbatical, now extended to leave of absence with the FRS, who has graciously given a platform to sensitize and to interrogate this inimical practice much more in order to enhance Nigeria's revenue potential and improve domestic resource mobilization. Now, in summary, illicit financial flows represent money legally earned but illegally moved.
Okay.
Or
legally earned but illegally moved.
Legally earned but illegally moved. Or,
and we are talking for the most part on foreign businesses in our country.
Or money illegally earned and illegally moved.
Okay.
Okay. Illegally earned, illegally moved, or illegally earned and legally moved.
Okay. So three options.
At any of those angles, it is tainted. So let's say, for example, your salary. You decide to take a holiday with your family. You can't take out more than $10,000 cash. If you have cash on you, indeed at the border control,
you have to declare.
You have to declare
above 10,000.
Exactly. Once it's above 10,000, it's your salary. You didn't steal it. You changed the money, or maybe it's your extra code. But when they ask you, do you have more than? You say no. Meanwhile, you have $11,000 on your person. It has become illicit because even though it was legally earned, you are moving it illegally.
Because you are not disclosing.
You are not disclosing it.
Because you can move it, but you must disclose.
You must disclose it. And if you are moving it in cash, the law prohibits you moving it in cash. Why not by electronic transfer? Why not on a digital wallet? And so on and so forth. Now, the Thabo Mbeki report, which
on the platform of AU.
Which was the AU in 10 years ago, this year, 2025, in 2015, set up the Mbeki panel to look at how Africa was losing capital to the global north. Capital that could have been used to catalyze development, that would have reduced our propensity for borrowing, that would have helped to address the issue of poverty and infrastructure deficit that Africa was. So the Mbeki panel came out with a very seminal report, which is globally accepted, that Africa was losing about 65% of capital outflow to illicit financial flows.
And we're talking of what figures, estimates?
About $50 to $80 billion annually.
Okay.
It's not small money. And of that, Nigeria, given the size of its economy, accounts for a substantial part of this. And 65% of that is around commercial transactions, which on the surface, they look normal.
And when you say commercial transactions,
I will explain.
Is what we are talking about business
exactly. Foreign business, multinationals who are doing business, and the channel through which they do this mostly is through transfer pricing. Now, transfer pricing is when corporate entities trade amongst themselves. So you have company X, which is a group. One is incorporated in Ghana, another one is incorporated in Nigeria, another one incorporated in the UK.
And it's the same company.
The same company, owned by the same set of people.
Yeah.
But the law pretends as if they don't know themselves. That's the first problem.
Right.
Okay? So they want to do business amongst each other. Company A in Nigeria wants to buy the microphones from Company B in the UK. The microphones cost $10. But in order to take money out of Nigeria, which has the big economy, they inflate the price to $100.
And it's going to be bought by their arm in Ghana.
Exactly. So now, it is assumed that this is a business transaction. Each of those companies can defend its economic interest by negotiating proper pricing. But we know that that is a fiction and a fallacy, because these companies are owned by the same set of people, and decision-making is actually centralized. In reality,
I'm sorry for interrupting, just so that our audience can follow. Does this happen including in the oil and gas industry?
It happens in any industry, but mostly in the extractives.
Okay.
In the extractive industry, so oil and gas, gold, minerals, solid mineral, mining. It happens in trade and consumer. It happens in telecommunications. It could happen in banking. Okay. It could happen in technology. Okay. So it could happen with consultancy services. I mean, for example, a company wants to do technology integration. There are IT experts in Nigeria. He then enters into an agreement with some IT experts from country X outside Nigeria.
Yeah.
And brings them, they come for one meeting. The Nigerian experts do all the work. You initiate a bill of $10 million and you purport to pay the chaps out there $10 million.
Right.
Who did not do the work. You have just moved capital.
Okay, so how are you helping the federal government to block this?
So first of all is to increase awareness. Many people who would have thought that commercial transaction, everybody, most African countries are promoting foreign direct investment.
Yes.
Some investment come with a problem and with a baggage. Okay? So if some of the investment that come with practices like this, corporate culture and practice, you will lose more than you gain. So if they falsify records, their trade transactions and all that, okay, the country loses more than it gains. So you hear the company saying, well, Nigeria is a challenging economic environment, but we're in it for the long run and all that. They declare low profits because they've increased operating expenses.
Right.
So they prevented the tax authority from taxing higher profits because they've already increased operating illegally. Okay, and fraudulently by documentation. Or somebody says, oh, I need 200 expatriates and gets expatriate quota for 200 and says I'm paying them. In this digital world, they are not in Nigeria.
Right, yeah.
Maybe only 10 of them have ever come to Nigeria, but you are paying salaries to people who are...
How do you feel?
So the first thing to do is to educate the officers and the general public, both the customers and the operatives of FRS, what represents illicit financial flows. How can it happen? How does it happen?
So that they will be on the lookout.
You must be able to recognize it when you are looking at the books.
Right.
If a company says, we took a loan to grow this company and we took the loan from another country, we're paying back. Of course, every year when you make profit, you must pay back the loan.
Yeah.
And you never ask for a copy of the loan agreement. You never saw the interest rate. You didn't, if your suspicion is aroused, you could initiate moves to reconfirm that a loan was taken in conduct. Because we've seen all manner of the companies who forge the record and say it's the investors who brought the money, but they say it's a loan. Instead of capital, instead of share capital, equity, they use it as debt. Do you understand?
The debt so that
they take out with interest.
Profit,
Exactly, and with interest. So you must first of all know what you are looking for. And this is an economy, and we are happy that President Tinubu is determined to improve Nigeria's domestic resource mobilization.
Yeah. Okay?
Because that is the pathway to development. It cannot be by overseas development assistance. It cannot be by loans, borrowing. Okay. It has to be by tax revenue.
From home.
So people must know, those who look at the assessment for companies must know what they are looking for.
The foreign companies.
Exactly. They must know what they are looking for.
Okay.
It's not only foreign companies who are implicated.
Yeah, of course.
Even Nigerian companies, when they do exports, Nigeria is trying to facilitate exports to grow non-oil export.
Yes.
So if you export 200 units of this phone, it is expected that when you earn revenue by selling abroad, you bring the money back home.
Yes.
But you falsify the paper. You exported 1,000. You put there, you exported 200. You leave the payment for 800
abroad,
offshore. You denied the government of revenue. It's illicit financial flow.
How do you fish that out?
So you work in collaboration with agencies like customs. So one of the ways to deal with some of these things and to standardize is one of the measures the government has taken recently, introducing the single window platform to make sure that those who do trade and business come through one channel.
It's easy to... Has that taken off? We talked about that forever.
So the government has appointed a focal person. Is domiciled within the FRS who is coordinating it. The custom will continue to play its traditional role of role of trade facilitation and all that.
Right.
But in terms of doing business to prevent both corruption and illicit outflows and all that, you go through one channel. That's why it's called a single window.
So that is happening now.
You go through that window.
Yeah, everybody
goes through that. So the infrastructure and the framework is being developed and all that. But the policy decision, which is the critical thing, is already been taken.
Okay.
So that's critical.
Thank you so much. You won't believe that our time is fast spent. And I wanted you to say something about judiciary reforms. You are a law professor, how can we reform the judiciary, in a very, just give me the nugget of it.
Well, it depends on, that's a big ticket conversation about the reform of the judiciary. What people usually focus on is funding. And I'm very happy and delighted that the remuneration of judges has recently been improved.
Well, because the federal government.
No, not just the federal government. The federal government pays state judges as well.
Okay.
So across the country, the remuneration of judges has been improved. Of course, it is expected that state governments will supplement and all that. That's one level of reform. The other level of reform is whether or not the judiciary gets enough allocation from the federal budget, not salary now, for its own infrastructure and all that. In that, opinion is divided. My view is that until the contrary is proven, I believe that the judiciary gets enough, because it is then up to it to allocate it in a progressive manner, okay, that meets its need to serve the public.
Right.
So how it's like your dad giving you your pocket money for the month, and you are supposed to use it to buy airtime for your phone, feed yourself, transport, and whatever other, and you assign 60% of it for transport. So you can't credit your phone and all that. It was your judgment. You got a lump sum. You decided how to spend it and all that. So the second matter of reform is about the administration of justice itself. The cost kill of judges, and why they are, most importantly, why they are appointed, is the ability to judge, decision making, the ability to decide right from wrong and what have you. They are not best primed for management of the court system, but the court system is a whole, it's a huge thing itself, to make sure that it flows and everything functions seamlessly. The judge arrives in court, there is light. The registrar has prepared the file. The fan or the air conditioner is working. There is internet to do research and download. It's not the job of the judge to worry. Do we have diesel today? No diesel, ma. No diesel, sir. When are they going to supply diesel? That should not be the job. Now, over the years, judges and registrars have struggled to manage this, and it has not worked well. In other countries, they've learned and moved on to appoint court administrators.
Interesting.
Specialized in this sort of function. So that when I get to court as a judge, and there is
my work,
and there is no electricity, somebody else is
worrying about that.
Yeah, somebody else needs to answer for it. Okay? When the budget of the judiciary is prepared, you don't expect the judges, the Chief Justice of Nigeria or the Chief Judge of the state to go and sit with politicians to answer line item by line item, as embarrassing as that is and can be. Somebody who understands what the needs of the judiciary should play that role. So the argument for me is that the reform we're talking about must cover all those things. And the last point for me is that to whom much is given, much is expected. We deserve to give the judiciary what it needs. It's a responsibility. But the judiciary also must give the society and the public what it needs, which is justice.
And public confidence.
And public confidence, which is at its lowest ebb for all times and has been badly eroded. So this is very important because otherwise the institution itself will lose its reputation. And it's a very critical arm of government. Over, no matter the type of political system of government you run, the judiciary has always been preserved. Even when it's a monarchy, you have judiciary. Dictatorship, you have judiciary. military rule, you have judiciary.
Yeah.
Democracy, you have the judiciary. Not once has the judiciary been wiped out. So which indicates its importance, to develop. So my view is that the judiciary needs to be accountable to the society to do an annual report in the minimum
of its activities.
What we received, how we spent it, what we did, where we are aspiring to go. And in the minimum, don't leave it to speculation. Don't leave it to bloggers to start abusing the individual judges and the institution. Don't leave it to the National Assembly to start breathing down on the institution.
But Prof, I wanted you, I'm sorry, so how should judges be relating publicly with politicians? We have seen quite a bit and quite embarrassing of judges hanging out with politicians, ministers saying they were going to build houses for judges and all kinds of those things that doesn't inspire public confidence. What do you say? What's your own view on that?
My view is contained in the judicial policy. The judges' code of conduct regulates all these things. And my simple response would be that those rules should be followed. Once they are followed, and they advise discretion. They advise discretion on the part of the judge. Okay? They advise discretion on the part of the judge in attending social events, being discreet in their visibility and with who and all that. Now, as far as provision of infrastructure and houses, if the system does not give the judges the money to do it, they need to have it. But the judiciary itself must be careful. So if the government decides that it's going to build, there's nothing wrong with it. But the judges need to be careful not to give the impression of compromise or losing their independence because a much-needed infrastructure is being provided. They are not going to live on the streets.
Exactly.
They are not going to live on the streets.
Thank you so much, Professor Obasanjo. You'll be surprised that we spent an hour already.
I'm surprised. You need to give back some of the time.
Finish the issues, but thank you so much for your contributions to the country. Especially as the Executive Secretary of PACAC and then Chairman of ICPC for those times, and what you're now doing with FRS to try and sort out some of the hemorrhaging of our financial assets in the country. And thank you so much also for coming to Inside Sources.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And there you have it, another edition of Inside Sources. Like we always say, Nigeria will prevail. It means that Nigeria will win because we will not relent on talking about the important issues. Thank you for watching. My name is Laolu Akonde. I'll see you at the next edition by the grace of God.